The DRAM crisis, stock issues, and rising prices are making buying a GPU really difficult right now. This situation becomes even more dire if you're on a tight budget. So if you're thinking of turning to the used market and slightly older GPUs, but don't know which ones to choose, you're in the right place. In this video, I'll tell you which GPUs are still worth picking up despite their age. If you're ready, let's get started. First, let's briefly go over some basics. Question 1. How do intergenerational differences affect things? Excluding the highest tier, modern generation GPUs generally run more efficiently. They either consume less power or offer higher performance at the exact same power draw. Alongside this, they also feature technologies like DLSS and frame generation. These play a highly critical role in extending the lifespan of a GPU. In addition to all this, thanks to technological advancements, we also see increases in the raw processing power of graphics cards. So how do these developments translate to the user? To summarize without getting too bogged down in details, RTX 2030 series. A massive hardware leap occurred when transitioning from the RTX 20 series to the RTX 30 series. Significant improvements were made in raw performance, ray tracing, and content creation. Even though power consumption became more efficient, models demanding higher wattages also emerged. Because of this, many consider this period the era where the intergenerational gap was most evident. RTX 30-40 series. The transition between the RTX 30 and RTX 40 series contained more limited changes in terms of raw power, but in return, it provided serious power efficiency. This means lower temperatures and much more stable operation. Frame generation technology was added, CUDA and tensor cores were improved, and productivity performance saw a boost. RTX 50 series. This has been a highly controversial series since its launch. If you're wondering why the RTX 50 series is so controversial, I covered it in detail in a dedicated video on my channel. But to summarize, looking at raw performance, excluding the 5090, there wasn't a huge performance jump in the 5070 and higher GPUs. The most logical improvements in the series generally happened on the 5060 and 5060 Ti side, as they shifted to a modified version of the Ada Lovelace architecture used in the RTX 40 series. Along with this, efficiency in productivity and production was increased, and multi-frame generation technology was introduced. In short, it became a series that didn't offer massive hardware leaps for gamers and was therefore somewhat disliked. The AMD side. Generally, improvements were made across power consumption, raw performance, ray tracing, and productivity. However, it's hard to say they are competing at the exact same level as NVIDIA's industry-defining moves. They are mostly focused on advancing by refining their existing technologies. That being said, they create a highly preferable alternative thanks to their more affordable pricing policies in some countries. Alright, now you have an idea of why aiming for current generations might be advantageous. Let's move on to the main question that's been confusing people lately. Question 2. How critical is VRAM? VRAM is the video memory located inside the GPU. Just like your PC's RAM, VRAM has a limited capacity. Since the process data is stored here, it has a direct impact on performance. To explain with a simple example without getting too technical, the GPU's processing power determines the flow rate of water in a river. VRAM is like a dam at the end of that river. The main determining factor in performance is the GPU's processing power. If the GPU you have is very weak, it will struggle even while moving the data to be processed. In such a case, having 24 gigabytes of VRAM doesn't provide any serious advantage. In other words, if the river is flowing slowly, a massive dam doesn't mean much. Think of it like a GTX 1050 Ti having 12 gigabytes of VRAM. However, the exact opposite scenario is also possible, and this is where users are most commonly mistaken. If the GPU is incredibly powerful, the VRAM capacity starts to show its importance much more clearly. The river flows very fast, and a serious load is put on the dam. If the VRAM capacity cannot handle this load, you might see stutters and performance drops in games. This time, imagine an RTX 5090 with 8 gigabytes of VRAM. It is usually the most logical choice to prefer GPU models like the RTX 3080, where VRAM capacity and processing power are perfectly balanced. But if there isn't a balanced option, it's generally better to choose the GPU with higher processing power in most scenarios. If you aren't going to be able to play future games on the highest graphical settings anyway, you might need to lower them. Unless a game is terribly unoptimized up to that point, the GPU generally won't produce enough data to completely fill the VRAM, and your performance will remain more stable. Now you have a basic grasp on VRAM too. Without wasting any more time, let's move on to the GPU models that can still be chosen despite their age. I've left a list on the screen containing my reasons for recommending them. Feel free to pause the video and read. If you're ready, let's start ranking them from worst to best. I would love to explain the reasons for my evaluation of each GPU at length, but unfortunately we don't have that much time. I only have room to mention the models actually worth picking up here. I do not recommend choosing any models in the GTX series because they fall way behind in DLSS, mesh shaders, ray tracing, and CUDA cores, and their driver updates have been completely cut off. And yes, this even includes the GTX 1080 Ti. Stay away. RTX 20 series. RTX 2080 Ti is a GPU that applies the power and VRAM balance very well here. Unlike the GTX 1080 Ti, it is more technologically future-proof, has 11 GB of VRAM, and sits right between the 3070 and 3070 Ti in terms of raw power. This means it can mostly do justice to that 11 GB. The reason it's in the yellow tier is simply that it's an older architecture, and there are models that apply this formula more efficiently. A quick and a very important note before we move on to the 30 series. The supercards in the RTX 20 series provide significant increases in performance. Make sure to prioritize those. RTX 30 series. RTX 3080 10 GB and 12 GB are truly balanced cards. Opting for the 12 GB version might be the more logical move because it gives you more breathing room on the VRAM side and is quite strong in raw performance. RTX 3080 Ti is an absolute gaming beast. In terms of gaming performance, it delivers FPS numbers very close to the RTX 3090, and sudden power spikes are at a much more controllable level. The only major difference is that it has 12 GB of VRAM. This amount is perfectly fine, but it's cutting it a bit close for 4K. RTX 3090 is very close to the 3080 Ti in gaming performance. However, power consumption is higher, which means a more serious PSU and cooling requirement for your build. On the flip side, the 24 GB VRAM capacity is a genuinely massive advantage. If you can find a clean card, it's a model that can carry you for many years. RTX 3090 Ti sits in an unnecessary spot for a gaming-focused build. It also offers 24 GB of VRAM, but the power consumption is much more terrifying. I'd say the 3090 Ti is a card geared a bit more towards production work. We've lingered on the NVIDIA side a bit too long. Now it's AMD's turn. Let's start with the RX 6000 series. The segment from the RX 6700 up to the RX 6800 is in the yellow category, meaning they are generally well-balanced cards. RX 6700 can deliver results on the level of the RTX 3060 Ti, and it does so with 10 GB of VRAM. This can provide a distinct advantage, especially as the resolution scales up. RX 6700 XT can outpace the RTX 3070 in some scenarios, especially at Quad HD. Otherwise, it is positioned between the 3070 and the 3060 Ti GDDR6X. RX 6750 XT shares a similar fate. Thanks to beating out the 3070's VRAM capacity, it can approach RTX 3070 Ti levels in certain scenarios. You can think of this as an intermediate model with a slight factory overclock, similar to the 6650 XT. RX 6800 16GB is the GPU that left me the most torn. Its raw muscle is quite close to the RTX 3080s, and thanks to its 16GB of VRAM, it offers a real advantage in Quad HD and even some 4K scenarios. I could call it green tier, but because there are models that execute this balance better, I see it sitting in a half yellow, half green spot. If the price is right, it easily gets bumped up to green. RX 6800 XT executes this formula much better. Overall, it sits midway between the 3080 Ti and 3080, offering a very stable experience thanks to its 16GB VRAM. RX 6900 XT is positioned between the 3080 Ti and the 3090. We can call the RX 6950 XT the last model where AMD and NVIDIA's flagships truly went head-to-head. After this model, AMD started falling significantly behind NVIDIA's top-tier cards. As you can guess, it has power close to the RTX 3090 and 3090 Ti. But this time, the 24GB VRAMs on RTX 3090 cards stand out more. Let's continue with the RX 7000 series. RX 7700 XT and RX 7800 XT absolutely deserve to be in the yellow tier. The balance of raw muscle and VRAM is fantastic. The 7700 XT is positioned between the RTX 4060 Ti and the RTX 4070 in performance. Its 12GB VRAM capacity is also well-balanced compared to the performance it delivers. The 7800 XT sits between the RTX 4070 and RTX 4070 Super. Its 16GB of VRAM is again well-tuned. RX 7900 GRE to RX 7900 XTX. As you can guess, this segment is still incredibly strong. RX 7900 GRE was launched in the global market to counter NVIDIA's RTX 4070 Supermove. Normally, GRE models used to be exclusive to the Chinese market. The reason this card is in the green category is that it strikes an excellent balance between performance and VRAM. Performance-wise, it competes directly with the RTX 4070 Super. RX 7900 XT generally goes toe-to-toe with the RTX 4070 Ti Super, and the RX 7900 XTX goes toe-to-toe with the RTX 4080 Super. You can buy it with total peace of mind. Now let's talk about the RTX 40 series, which isn't considered very old but can still be highly advantageous on the used market. The segment from the RTX 4070 to the RTX 4070 Ti is in the yellow category, meaning they are balanced and preferable models. There is a noticeable performance difference between the RTX 4070 and the GeForce RTX 4070 Super. Therefore, as long as the price gap isn't huge, the 4070 Super might be a much more logical choice. We can summarize their approximate positioning relative to the RTX 30 series as shown on screen. The segment from the RTX 4070 Ti Super up to the RTX 4090 is still exceptionally good today. While the RTX 4070 Ti has 12 GB of VRAM, the 4070 Ti Super comes with 16 GB of VRAM. This makes the Ti Super model a much more balanced and longer-lasting option. There isn't a massive difference between the RTX 4080 and the RTX 4080 Super. The RTX 4090, meanwhile, is still an unbelievably powerful card today. It can easily be chosen instead of moving to the RTX 50 series. Now, to give you a better perspective, let's look at the current equivalents of these GPUs and some newer GPUs that are still worth considering. Let's start with the RTX 50 series. RTX 5050 offers performance between the RTX 4060 and RX 7600 XT. It doesn't get bullied by a previous generation GPU the way the RTX 3050 did. RTX 5060 offers similar performance to the RTX 4060 Ti. Again, we see a nice bump up. RTX 5060 Ti 16GB is very similar in performance to the RX 7700 XT. Unlike the 8GB version, its VRAM is quite sufficient. RTX 5070 is similar to the RTX 4070 Super. It sticks with 12GB of VRAM again, but the VRAM on the RTX 50 series is GDDR7, meaning it's faster. This can make a real difference, especially in Quad HD and 4K scenarios. RTX 5070 Ti sits between the RTX 4070 Ti Super and the RTX 4080. RTX 5080 is more powerful than the RTX 4080 Super, but its 16GB of VRAM is a bit of a bummer. RTX 5090 is the king of the hill, but as I always say, the RTX 5090 is not a card to buy just to play games. It comes with extreme power consumption, serious heat output, and an absurd price tag. That's why a more balanced model like the RTX 5080 makes much more sense for gamers. And finally, let's talk about the RX 9000 series. RX 9060 and RX 9060 XT 8GB are models you should grab while prices are low, but NVIDIA's software and technological advantage is much more pronounced in this segment. The RX 9060 was released for OEM PCs, so it's hard to stumble across. It generally performs similarly to the RTX 5060 and RTX 4060 Ti. The RX 9060 XT 8GB, much like the 5060 Ti 8GB, is heavily limited by its VRAM. Its processing power is better than the 5060, but slightly weaker than the 5060 Ti. Position-wise, it's closer to the RTX 4060 Ti. RX 9060 XT 16GB is the only yellow card in the 9000 series. Even though the RTX 5060 Ti 16GB is slightly more powerful, AMD has created serious competition with an aggressive pricing policy. Also, thanks to architectural improvements, it has become a more logical option than the previous generation's Radeon RX 7700 XT. RX 9070 and RX 9070 XT are extremely balanced cards. It was particularly noteworthy when the RX 9070 XT offered 5070 Ti-level performance for the price of an RTX 5070. The RX 9070 generally takes a back seat because of pricing. With 16GB of VRAM, it's a direct competitor to the RTX 5070. The RX 9070 XT is the real banger. It delivers RTX 5070 Ti raw muscle at an affordable price. On top of these, there were rumors that a more powerful model like an RX 9080 XT might arrive. However, AI investments and the market shifting in that direction make AMD's high-end strategy pretty uncertain right now. Because of this, it's hard to say anything definitive. Now you know which older GPUs you should look out for, and what to keep in mind when making your decision here. So, what is your pick? Don't forget to let me know in the comments. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. If not, feel free to dislike it. Stay mysterious until the next video. Take care and bye.